It's really impressive, I must admit, and it's amazing for the game. I think that they play back to back to back to back.
There's a certain kind of silence a broadcaster makes when he's about to say something he truly means. It lasts just a little longer than a breath, but not quite long enough to be called a pause. And if you've watched enough tennis on television, you learn to recognize it. On a rainy afternoon in Miami earlier this year, during a live segment of Tennis Channel Live, a man in his 60s wearing a blue shirt made that silence. His name was Paul Annacone, the coach who spent 3 years in Roger Federer's box and, before that, 3 years helping Pete Sampras maintain the world #1 ranking.
He's my idol and what's that today?
He leaned toward the microphone and started talking, unprompted, about a 21-year-old from Quezon City ranked 32nd in the world. Her name was Alex Eala. He said her smile could light up a room. He talked about her grace and humility. And then, almost as an afterthought, he said something most viewers probably missed, a forward technical phrase rooted in the same coaching philosophy he had spent decades teaching some of the greatest players in tennis history. So here's the question this entire video is going to try to answer. Why did the coach who built his professional reputation around the art of taking time away from an opponent stop during a rainy day broadcast in Miami point to a 21-year-old Filipina and quietly suggest that she could already do exactly that? Because on the surface, it looks like an ordinary television moment. An analyst previews a tournament. The analyst says a few nice things about a rising player. Filipino fans clip the segment. The clip circulates. Everyone moves on. But if you stop there, you miss what actually happened. Paul Annacone wasn't simply complimenting Alex Eala. He was placing her inside a very specific stylistic tradition of tennis, the tradition of the aggressive first strike, the player who takes the ball early, redirects it, and refuses to give an opponent extra time. And he did it without making a big announcement. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't turn it into a headline. He simply said it. And nobody in the studio challenged him, because on some level, everyone understood what he was describing. The question isn't whether Annacone praised Eala. He did. The question is what exactly was he praising and why. 5 months later, that moment is beginning to look less like a compliment and more like a diagnosis. That's the story. If you care about where Alex Eala's career goes next, subscribe now, because this channel will be following her through the US Open and the Asian Swing. And this is the frame you're going to want to keep in mind. Now, quickly, because most of you already know the broad outline, and the details you may not know will become important as we go. Alex Eala is 21 years old. She is the first Filipina to break into the WTA Top 20 and is currently ranked world #20, the highest ranking of her career. In 2026 alone, she has posted a 37-19 record on tour. She has one WTA singles title, and it is a significant one, the Mubadala DC Open, a WTA 500. She won that title 2 weeks ago by defeating Naomi Osaka, then Elina Svitolina, before beating world #3 Jessica Pegula in the final. That's the resume. That's the shape of the year. But for this story, there's a smaller detail hidden inside all of it. Back in early March, when Paul Annacone said Eala's name on television, she was ranked #32 in the world. She had exactly 0 WTA singles titles. And she had never defeated a top 3 player in her career. Hold on to that. Because in about 10 minutes, we're going to come back to it, and it's going to mean something very different. Now look at the parts of Annacone's segment that don't quite fit the obvious explanation. Take them one at a time. First paradox. Paul Annacone began talking about Alex Eala by praising her manners. He said her smile could light up a room. He talked about the grace and humility she showed after defeating Iga Swiatek in Miami the previous year. Now, elite coaches don't normally use valuable national television time to discuss etiquette. Annacone has coached players responsible for 22 combined Grand Slam titles. Preview talking about how gracious a player was on a court she had left nearly 18 months earlier. Hold that question. We'll come back to it. Second paradox. In the same breath, Annacone did something unusually specific for a television analyst. He named her exact ranking. According to the transcript reproduced by Tennis Head, he said, "She obviously wants to get better than where she is now at 32 in the world." That detail matters. Broadcasters previewing tournaments rarely bother with exact rankings unless the number itself is relevant. More often, they say a player is just outside the top 30 or that she's climbing quickly. Annacone gave the exact number. And immediately after that, he shifted into technical language. He talked about her hand-eye coordination and her ability to take the ball early and redirect it. That is an oddly specific compliment. It sounds less like something an analyst says to a casual television audience and more like something a coach says when evaluating another coach's player. So why did he choose that vocabulary for Eala on that particular broadcast? Hold that one too, because that may be the most important piece of the entire segment. Third paradox. And this one appears to belong to an entirely different conversation. Annacone closed the segment by talking about her fans. Specifically, he pointed to the passion surrounding players from smaller countries when they begin reaching the highest levels of the sport. That isn't simply a coaching observation. It's an observation about audience, about reach, about the commercial shape of a career beyond the baseline. So, what is a former Federer coach, someone whose professional reputation was built almost entirely around what happens between the lines, doing by framing a 21-year-old's fan base as an asset on live television in the same breath that he is discussing her forehand? Hold on to that. Because when the pieces finally come together, all three paradoxes collapse into one surprisingly simple idea. Here's what I think was actually happening. And I want to make something clear from the beginning. This is an interpretation of a public broadcast based on the words Annacone chose and the coaching resume he brings to those words. He did not sit down with me and explain this interpretation. This is not a claim about what was inside his head. It is a reading of what he actually said and what becomes noticeable when you look at the entire segment instead of just the viral clip. Because the assumption most people have made is simple. Paul Annacone praised Alex Eala because she was a promising young player and he liked her game. Federer's former coach said nice things. Great story. Feel-good moment. Move on. But that interpretation misses something. What actually happened was much more interesting. In roughly 45 seconds of live television, Annacone quietly identified two qualities that could make Alex Eala unusually valuable to the WTA at this stage of her career. One was technical, the other was commercial. And he mentioned them in that order. Because that is the order in which they matter. Annacone has spent his adult life thinking about why certain young players become elite and why others don't. That is the reframe. It wasn't simply praise. It was evaluation. The comments about grace and humility weren't merely etiquette talk. They were Annacone identifying something about Eala's temperament, suggesting that she possesses the composure required to handle the attention and pressure that come with becoming the first Filipina to reach this level of professional tennis. The comment about taking the ball early wasn't a generic compliment. It placed her inside a technical lineage Annacone understands better than almost anyone. The aggressive player who takes time away from opponents, redirects pace, and turns small openings into immediate advantages. And then there was the comment about her fans. That wasn't just a throwaway observation. It was Annacone recognizing that Eala's value extends beyond the court. A player with an enormous and deeply invested national audience represents something the WTA cares about just as much as rankings and results: reach. 3 observations. 3 potential assets. 1 diagnosis. And the reason most viewers needed a second listen to catch it is that Annacone doesn't talk like someone trying to manufacture a headline. He talks like a coach. Which brings us to the proof. Take a breath here. Because none of this would matter if the diagnosis hadn't held up. Coaches say things on television every week. Analysts preview tournaments every week. Players get praised. Clips go viral. And then everyone moves on. What separates this particular segment from the ordinary version of itself is what happened afterward. 5 months have passed. And now we can ask the question that actually matters. Did the specific qualities Annacone identified in Alex Eala on that rainy afternoon in Miami actually show up on the court? So, let's go through the proof. Proof number 1 is the number. When Annacone said Alex Eala's name on Tennis Channel Live, She was ranked number 32 in the world. As of this week, according to the official WTA rankings, she is number 20. She is the first Filipina to break into the WTA top 20. And in the months since that broadcast, she has defeated Donna Vekic, Jasmine Paolini, Elena Gabriela Ruse, Naomi Osaka, Alina Svitolina, and Jessica Pegula. That list includes a former Grand Slam finalist, multiple former top 5 players, a Grand Slam champion, and the current world number 3. Annacone said on television that he enjoyed watching her play and wanted to see her continue to progress. But progress almost feels like too gentle a word. 12 ranking places, a WTA 500 title, and a victory over the world number 3. All in roughly 5 months. That isn't slow development. That's acceleration. And it is remarkably close to the trajectory Annacone was describing when he first put her name on television. Proof number 2 is the vocabulary. And this is the part you have to sit with, because it is incredibly easy to hear it and move on. When Annacone said Alex Eala has the ability to take the ball early and redirect, he wasn't reaching for the nearest available compliment. That phrase describes a category of tennis. In coaching language, taking the ball early means striking the ball on the rise, before it reaches the peak of its bounce. The result is simple but brutal. Your opponent has less time to recover. Redirecting means taking a ball traveling in one direction and changing its path, turning a cross-court ball into a down-the-line attack, or reversing the pattern before your opponent can reset. Put those two skills together, and you get the DNA of first-strike tennis. It is the kind of tennis that shortens points before they have a chance to become physical battles. It is a principle that defined Pete Sampras' ability to control points around his serve. It was also central to Roger Federer's ability to create devastating angles and take time away from opponents. And Annacone spent years working inside the teams of both players. So when a coach with that background looks at a 21-year-old Filipina and says she already possesses those instincts, he isn't simply saying, she has a nice game. He is placing her inside a technical language he knows exceptionally well. It's the difference between a chef saying, your soup tastes good, and a chef correctly identifying the 3 ingredients that make the soup work. One is praise. The other is diagnosis. And earlier this year, Kim Clijsters made a similar observation about Eala's belief and poise after her Abu Dhabi and Dubai runs, according to Tennis Head. That pattern matters. The most experienced voices aren't describing Eala primarily through where she comes from. They're not talking only about her growing fan base, her nationality, or the attention surrounding her. They're describing how she plays. And that distinction becomes important when a young player's career begins changing rapidly. Let that sit for a second. Because this is the hinge of the entire story. Then comes proof number 3. This is where the analysis becomes something you can actually watch happening on court. Go back to the DC Open final. Alex Eala walked onto center court in Washington to face Jessica Pegula, the same Pegula who had beaten her in Miami the previous year. And this was not an easy matchup. Pegula is a very specific kind of opponent. She doesn't need to overwhelm you with raw power. She absorbs. She redirects. She takes your pace and sends it back with interest. And she rarely gives away points through physical mistakes. If you want to beat Pegula, you have to create shots she simply cannot reach. Eala lost the first set 6-4. Then something changed. She won the second set 6-4. And in the third, against the world number 3 in a WTA 500 final, she produced something extraordinary. She won 6 games in a row. A bagel. 6 games to love against a top 3 player in a championship match. The final score, 4-6, 6-4, 6-0. And with that victory, Eala became the first Filipina to win a WTA 500 singles title. Now, here's where I want to be careful. What I'm about to describe is my reading of the tape, not Annacone's. But go back and watch that third set with his Tennis Channel live comment in your head. Watch what Eala is doing. She is taking Pegula's ball early. She is striking the ball before Pegula has time to reset. She is redirecting cross-court balls down the line. She is changing direction before Pegula can recover her positioning. Point after point, she is compressing the amount of time Pegula has to respond. And eventually, Even one of the best absorbers in women's tennis is being forced to chase shots she simply doesn't have enough time to reach. That's not just a generic example of playing aggressively. It is a specific technical skill being applied at an extremely high level against a specific opponent and producing a very specific result. 5 months earlier, Annacone had identified that exact ability. 5 months later, Eala used it to win the biggest title of her career. The diagnosis had held up. But there are some things this story does not prove, and I want to be very clear about them. It does not prove that Paul Annacone believes Alex Eala is destined to win a Grand Slam. He never said that. What he said was that she wanted to get better than where she was at number 32. That's a forward-looking observation. It is not a prediction. So don't turn his words into an anointing that never happened. It wasn't one. It also doesn't prove that Annacone sat down that day intending to make some grand statement about Eala. He didn't. He was previewing Indian Wells. Eala came up as part of the conversation, and he responded thoughtfully. The interpretation I'm putting on the segment, that his vocabulary represented a technical diagnosis rather than a simple compliment, is still an interpretation. It's grounded in what he said. It's informed by the career he built. But it remains a reading. And the most honest version of this story may actually be the simplest one. A highly qualified coach watched Alex Eala play, chose unusually specific words to describe what he saw, and then turned out to be right. That's already significant. It doesn't need to become something bigger than that. And there's one more piece of honesty we need to include. Eala's rise hasn't been perfectly linear. 2 days ago, she lost in the second round of the Cincinnati Open to Amanda Anisimova, the current world number 10. Eala lost the first set 6-4, fought back to take the second 6-4, and then lost the deciding set. This was her first tournament as a top 20 player. She went out in the second round. That's a real result. And it belongs in the same story as the DC Open title. The player who can take time away from Pegula on Sunday can still lose a tight 3-set match to Anisimova a few days later. Both things can be